Good afternoon. López Moro from Tacuarembó, Uruguay for Coach Bielsa. First of all, congratulations of making it to the quarterfinals. And I wanted to ask you, how did it go for you outside the pitch, outside the stadium, and whether your absence against the United States affected the team? Because the team seemed to feel your absence because it did not perform just as well in working with their wingers, making it to the opposite box. Do you think it was your absence that actually affected the performance of the team, that it was not the same that it had been against Brazil and the other teams that it had played against? I don't think my absence had any effect on the team. And I think that except for the end of the match, when the United States, with a very offensive arrangement and attacking with players on all lines, created certain hazards that hurt us. But I don't think that anything would have played out differently if I had been on the pitch. I don't think their performance would have been better.
Bien, Ernesto Faría de Radio Universal. Muy
Ernesto
buenas
Farias
tardes.
from
Quería
Radio
preguntarte por
Universal.
muchas
Good
veces discutimos
afternoon.
este partido
I
sobre
wanted to
el
ask you a
campo
little bit
jugado,
about
nosotros
the
tenemos
game,
nuestro
whether
punto de
you can
vista respecto
actually
del partido con
elaborate on
Brasil
that
y el
analysis,
partido
because after the
contra
match
Costa
against the
Rica.
United States, we didn't have any
¿Qué
contact
se
with
observó
you.
después del partido?
So,
¿Se
what
tiene
are the
cosas de
lessons learned
preocupación,
from
de
that
agrupación
match?
para corregir, para
And
mejorar
actually,
de cara al
what sort
siguiente
of
partido con Brasil?
concerns did the match raise looking at the next game with Brazil? Well, normally, I always try to see in what areas of the pitch we actually played, where we were able to recover the ball, whether we created any danger for our opponents, and whether the way we recovered the ball and prepared our offense actually reflects the style that we want for our team. This is basically the top factors that I always analyze. And in certain aspects, the conclusions were more positive. We have certain things to be corrected almost on every front, but also the possibilities of fixing those shortcomings, considering the limited amount of time between one match and the other, and the fact that the team also needs to recover physically. All we can do is to talk to our players
Eduardo
or to
Rivas y dirección
practice with
para Marcelo
videos.
Bielsa,
Eduardo
Marcelo Bielsa
Rivas from
recordando el
Channel
partido de
4
mañana,
for Marcelo Bielsa.
obviamente que
Considering the game
Brasil hay una ausencia
tomorrow and
notoria, la
looking
ausencia de
at that
Vinicius,
game,
alguien
obviously
que considera
Brazil
como el
will
mejor
have a
extremo
notorious
del
absence,
mundo
the
en estos
absence of
momentos.
Vinicius,
Esto
that you consider to be the
modifica
best
algo
winger in the
en
world
algún
right
porcentaje
now.
la estrategia del
Does
equipo de
this at
selección
all
para el partido de mañana.
affect the strategy
Gracias.
of our national team for tomorrow's game? Well, I personally don't believe that it affects it at all. Brazil is a country that has many wingers, both left and right, nowadays playing in the biggest teams across the world and performing at a great level. So, whatever substitute they choose to fill in for Vinicius is not going to be easily neutralized by us.
Vamos a hacer un cambio de micrófono.
We are going to
Un momento, por
change the
favor.
mic. Just a second, please.
del Plata.
Good morning, Leo Ortiz for Onda del Plata, and my
¿Cómo
question is for
está llevando
Pelestri.
todos estos partidos,
How are
las
you
cargas musculares que
coping
están
with
teniendo?
the muscular tiredness and all the games, both you and your teammates that have played the longer amount of minutes? I would say very well, because I've already said in the past that we had a very tough physical training to make it to Copa America in the best possible condition. We know what our game style is to apply pressure in the opposite half, and we knew that every match was going to be intense, and so we prepared accordingly.
Marcelo,
Marcelo,
Marcelo, ahora sí. Marcelo, buenas tardes.
Marcelo,
Le saluda Eugenio
good
Salinas de
afternoon.
Radio
Eugenio
Bio
Salinas, Bio Bio
en esta
Radio
posición,
in
sobre todo.
Chile. It's a pleasure to see you once again and in this position. Having followed you with the Chilean national team through every match, we know that in every single match you see all players. So I wanted to ask you whether you've liked the soccer that you've seen in Copa America. What are the teams that you've liked the best? And if you've seen Chile's national team, if you could comment on how you saw our
Bueno, hay
performance.
un equipo que,
Un equipo que
revelación, que es el
revelación,
equipo,
que es
no
There's
revelación,
actually a
revelación, que es
Cinderella team. Well, not so much of a Cinderella
más
team,
cautivo con,
but the
con
one that
mucho
has
que
actually
produjo,
seduced the
es,
most with
es
the football they've
Colombia,
created, which is
un
Colombia.
equipo que unánimemente está valorado
It is a team that
y
is
respecto
unanimously applauded by
de la
everyone.
selección chilena,
And with respect to the
tuve la
Chilean national
oportunidad
team, I have
de
not
ver
had
los
the
partidos con
opportunity
la
of watching the
profundidad
games
que, si bien los vi,
with the
no los vi
attention
con
that I
la
would have liked
profundidad
to. Although I've
que
actually seen them,
merece,
I haven't watched them
eh,
as carefully
que es necesaria
as I would
para
need
comentar
in order
sobre
to
la
comment on
producción
your performance.
de un equipo, ¿no? Aparte, bueno, tratándose
And in addition to
de,
that,
de una selección y de un país que
especially
tuvo
considering that we're talking about a national team
tenemos por
and a country for
apertura,
which I have the utmost
eh,
respect and to which I
siempre
am extremely
prefiero
thankful,
ser
I'd
cauto, respetar
rather be
el momento,
cautious
el
and
entrenador, los
show respect
futbolistas
for the times of the coach and the
y
soccer players
solo lo necesario.
and speak as little as possible.
Buenas tardes para
Good
Facundo,
afternoon to
Álvaro Izquierdo,
Facundo
acá en
Alvaro
los Estados Unidos.
Izquierdo from Fox Sports here in the United States. Some years ago, you were still playing in the U20 for Peñarol. You came here with Forlan and you wanted to get stronger in Peñarol. 3 years after that, in Qatar, you said that you wanted to get stronger and win your place in the national team. Now you are a figure, and the Brazilian national team is concerned about you. So, what would you tell about the U20s in Uruguay? What is the secret to make it here? Good afternoon. I think little by little you set goals for yourself and you work to attain those goals. Every goal requires effort and sacrifice. And my message out to the youth that are going through to what I actually lived through when I was in the minor leagues is to follow their dreams, to go for it, that every dream requires sacrifice and effort is of the essence. But if you actually put in your best, sooner or later you can get to be successful. But without effort, it's very hard to make it. So their biggest concern is to do things right and to try to enjoy the journey because sometimes everything happens so quickly and you need to enjoy the journey as well. To Facundo Gabriel Regueira from Carro Deportivo, how are you doing? How are you preparing for tomorrow's match? Not only from a soccer standpoint, but also from a psychological standpoint to play this classic against Brazil. And what do you think of what Pereira said yesterday in the press conference where he addressed the media? He said that we, Uruguay, would like to have a national team just like theirs. Well, from a training standpoint, we have the utmost respect for Brazil and for every opponent. Our training is just the same. We've trained in the same way to take on every one of our opponents. It's going to be a beautiful match, both from a players and from a viewer standpoint. And in terms of Andrea Pereira's declarations, I had not heard them. I worked with him in Manchester, but sometimes you just say things to try to trigger a reaction. But both teams know that it's going to be an incredible match and that both national teams has the greatest potential. So as I said, it's going to be a great show, and we prepare just like we prepare for every other match.
Para el señor Marcelo
To
Bielsa,
Marcelo
Carlos
Bielsa,
Bardaquian,
Carlos
Radio Oriental,
Bardaquian from Radio
el año
Oriental.
pasado Uruguay venció
Last
desde su inicio
year,
por la eliminatoria 2 a
Uruguay
0.
beat
Usted dijo
Brazil
después
in the
de
Centenary
este
Stadium for
partido,
the
de ese
qualifiers
partido,
2 to
viendo este
0, 2 to
contexto, viendo
0.
el
And you
contexto,
made a tactical
objetivo de
adjustment
Uruguay,
trying
igualar
to
condiciones
sink
y
the
situaciones y
containment.
quedar fuera
You
de la
took certain
eliminatoria.
precautions
Ese
that
partido,
allowed
ese
Uruguay
partido
to
filtró
set the tone
material
of the game and to
tenía
get a
para el
win.
testeo
Does that
del día de mañana
game
y
serve
algo
as an
se
input in
agregó si los jugadores
outlining
amables
tomorrow's
puntuales a la mesa en el
strategy?
transcurso de la
And could you
conversación que
please
generó
confirm if
en
all the
momento de más
players
empuje y
are
concentración de Manuel
good to
Ugarte.
play,
Muchas gracias.
considering the
Sí,
concern
están todos
of
los
Maxi and
jugadores
Huarte? Yeah,
disponibles
every single player
y
are available for the
aquel
game.
antecedente
And in terms of
a
that
veces
previous match
es
we played last
difícil
year,
traspolar eh,
sometimes it's tough
experiencias pasadas con
to extrapolate past
compromisos actuales,
experiences
porque
and
no
compare
son los
them to
mismos
our current
jugadores, no
commitments
es el mismo
because it's not the
entrenador,
same players, it's not
no
the
es la
same coach,
misma realidad
it's a different reality
deportiva.
in
Hay
terms of
muchos puntos
their
de diferencia,
sports
eliminatoria
performance.
con
There are
otra
many
temporada,
differences, the
jugar en
qualifiers against
pretemporada, jugar en
Copa
pretemporada,
America, the time of the
entrenador,
season,
perfil del
the players that were
entrenador,
called up,
es
those
otro
that are
equipo y
available,
muchos otros que
the coach
seguramente
profile, and all of
esta
these
lista no
differences
contiene, pero
have a
existen
bearing, and this
como
list
para
is
que
non-exhaustive
tomar
because
como
there are many
base
other
lo que
differences out
pasó
there. So
antes.
I don't think that we could use as a basis something
Facundo,
that
por
is
acá,
now in the past.
Rodrigo Romano, directamente de
Facundo, Rodrigo Romano,
DirecTV.
DirecTV, Tele2, TV. It is clear that your nature is to work as a winger on the offense, but I would like you to share with the people what are the different duties of that position in the national team with Marcelo Bielsa as a coach. And the reason I'm asking this is because many times we saw you defending over those matches, for instance, playing closely in the area of Matias Pina. So I want to ask you about the responsibilities of a winger in the Uruguayan national team with this coach. Well, it's not only my position. That happens with many other positions on the pitch. Of course, our opponents, and virtually right now, everyone plays different positions and everyone has a two-fold role and a more loosely defined role. We don't want to leave any man loose, and sometimes we need to go back in the pitch. But it depends on the different times of the game because when you are defending along the flanks, you know that there's a lot of space ahead of you that you can actually draw an advantage from. So we always want to play a starring role and we never want to leave any opponent free so that they can take the ball. And sometimes you need to avoid any spaces that they can fill in. Mauricio Maya, ESPN Mexico for Marcelo Bielsa, coach. Today in the Uruguayan national team, we have a roster with lots of individual talents, soccer players that are currently performing at the best teams in the world's best leagues. So, what is the effect of this individual success on the Uruguayan national team collective
Esencialmente es
performance?
una pregunta
In
basada
all
en
fairness,
conclusiones
this question is based
comprobables que son
on
ciertas pero a su vez
conclusions that are actually
estoy
true, but it's also a
incapacitado de
question that
respondértelo
I don't feel I'm in a
en el
position to
sentido de
answer.
que diría
Why so?
así para, por cortesía, elaborar
Because
una respuesta en lo
out of
que
courtesy, I
igual me
should
parece
speculate on a
incompleto.
response
Primero porque
that
es
would
hay
still
es un
prove
jugador que ha hecho
inadequate in
un
my view, because
crecimiento,
there is a group of players that have
una
shown
evolución que le
significant
permite
growth and
ocupar
evolution
espacios
that has allowed
indiscutiblemente en
them
equipos de la élite europea.
to fill
Eso en
spaces
grandes
in
equipos del
elite
mundo
teams
ningún
in
jugador
Europe. In the
permanece
world's biggest teams, no player can
fuera y
survive if
tiene
they do
la
not deserve
capacidad de
it,
sustituir a aquel
because
que a pesar de sus
top
antecedentes
teams
no
have a
produzca
capacity
algo
to
de
substitute any player that
entonces
does not
yo
perform as
creo que
expected, no matter what
eh,
their past performance is.
ha
So
merecido
anyone that is
existir
playing there is there
y
because they've
después
earned
también
their position there.
yo creo, pero esto es más
Additionally,
un- una intuición o una valoración
and
que
this is more a
en,
personal
en la
appreciation,
formación del futbolista
I believe that
Uruguay tiene algo
in a
diferencial
player's
que es una
training
cultura
path,
nacional
Uruguay has
muy
a
competitiva
differential,
desde
which
edades
is
muy
a highly
tempranas.
competitive national league
Como
from
todos
very early
sabemos,
ages.
todo el mundo desaconseja,
And
todos los especialistas desaconsejan
all
que se
specialists
recrimina
actually
las edades y
discourage
privilegie la competencia.
privileging competition
Esto
at
es un
early
cerrajo
stages.
tan
But that trait,
distintivo del jugador uruguayo de
that is a
más que nunca,
distinctive
en la
characteristic of
urbanística tiene
Uruguayan
una
players
virtud principalísima
of
que lo hace
having
temible.
this
Primero,
competitiveness as
esfuerzos
one of their main virtues
a
make
gran nivel
them
en común con sus condiciones.
actually
Creo que se origina en ese recurso
play at the
que
greatest level. And I
es una
think
liga
this
nacional
stems
donde participan
from the fact that our national league is a
muchísimos
league
niños, según lo
with
que yo
many
escucho,
kids.
50, 60 mil niños desde los
I
10
believe,
13
from what I've
años hasta
heard,
los 9
50, 60,000 kids
hasta
from 10 to
14,
13 years old
perdón,
or 9 to
compitiendo
14
con canchas
competing
adaptables, pero con cantidad de
with
muchos
pitches that
jugadores por
are
equipo.
adjustable
eh,
but with many players per
y
team.
para mí, algo de eso, algo de ese recurso tiene que ver
And
con el afán competitivo
I think that has to do with the
desarrollado que tienen los jugadores
highly
uruguayos.
developed competitiveness of Uruguayan
Carlos
players.
Alemán de Winsport de Colombia, le quiero
Carlos
preguntar
Aleman
sobre
from
los
Winsports
entrenadores
Colombia. I would
que
like to ask
mencionó,
Coach Bielsa. You
Colombia,
were just
que le ha
mentioning
gustado,
Colombia. What did you like about the Colombian national team? Could you further elaborate on that? Because it could be an opponent of you in the next phase.
Bueno,
Thank you.
primero es un equipo al que le sobran delanteros y
Well, first
eso
of all,
en el
is a
mundo del
team
fútbol
that
es
has
común.
strikers to spare, and that's
Segundo, es un
uncommon in the
equipo que
world of
tiene
soccer. Second
más
of
de una
all,
opción para cada puesto.
it is a team
Eso
that has more than
y sin
one
grandes diferencias
alternative for every
entre
position
el
without
que
huge
inicia
differences
respecto del
between
que
the
ingresa
starters
y en
and the
todas las
subs.
posiciones. Eh,
And that holds
Tercero,
true for
que
every
se ha
single
visto que
position.
todas estas cosas
Third,
son cosas que se pueden
I'm sure you will have seen that
verificar porque no son
all
opiniones
of this
mías
is
ni,
easily
ni privadas.
verifiable. It's not just my opinion, these
El
are
jugador
facts.
colombiano ha sufrido
Colombian
una
players
transformación porque juegan en las
have
mejores ligas del
undergone a
mundo
huge transformation because they are
y
playing now
compiten con
for the
naturalidad
world's best
frente a la
leagues
frescura
and they compete
y el
naturally in
fútbol
those leagues. So,
de
in
predominio
addition to
creativo
their spontaneity and their creative play that has always characterized
a las
Colombia
expresiones de ese país ahora se le ha agregado
and the football play
aquello que
there,
es indispensable para sobrevivir al
now
fútbol de hoy,
they add what is indispensable to
Federico
survive
Huizán
in
por acá.
today's
Federico
soccer.
Huizán por acá,
Federico
DirecTV
Huizán, over there, DirecTV, Sports 890 and Canal 12 for Facu. Guillermo Arana is going to be playing as a right wing. Do you know his characteristics? And why do you think that they have introduced this game? And I want to ask you about Vinicius' absence. How is that going to affect the game? And for the coach, oh, only one, so we cannot ask him. Okay, Facu, go ahead. So, in terms of your first question, of course, Brazil has a very complete roster. So, any player filling that position has their own characteristics and great potential. They're pretty similar in terms of how they play. We all know how left wings and right wings like to play in Brazil, so I'm not concerned about that. And as for Vinicius, we all know what Vinicius means. He's one of the world's greatest players, but just as I said, for left wings and right wings, they have many players to fill in for Vinicius. Of course, they are not the same, but they still have very good qualities, and we are ready to take on whoever we need to take on in that
por acá,
place. Over here,
Marcelo Bielsa,
for
Javier de León.
Marcelo Bielsa, Javier
Buenas
de
tardes,
León.
vamos que vamos, cadena
Good
celeste,
afternoon, vamos que vamos,
Mundo
Cadena
Deportivo.
Celeste, Mundo
Ahorita
Deportivo,
en la
Claro
evaluación
Sports.
global de la
A little
Copa
bit
MX,
about the
para los
global
tres,
assessment of
ojalá
Copa
nos queden tres,
America. We've already
estaremos
played three
en el
matches. I
terminal
hope that we
del
still have
torneo
three ahead of
con
us
mucha
because that would
intensidad,
mean that we would have
intensidad
make it to the
en eso, en el
final.
físico, en la necesidad física,
You
importancia
propose
en un
a very
torneo y en un
intense
país
games
en
that
contextos de alta
creates
temperatura y alta humedad como por
strong
ejemplo
physical
hoy
wear
en la ciudad de
in
Cruz del
a
Calvario. Mañana el
country
partido va a
with
ser en el Estadio
great
Olímpico, así que las temperaturas
humidity and high
a todo
temperatures.
enfriado. Estamos en alta
Tomorrow is
temperatura.
going
En
to
ese
be an air
contexto de alta
conditioned
temperatura y alta
beach with
humedad,
ideal
algunos sectores
temperature, but
en el
all the
contexto
rest
de
is
su
with high
juego, de
temperatures
elección
and
de juego,
high
como usted ha manejado
humidity.
más de una vez,
And
¿cómo influye
considering
con
your
esta cifra
game
la
too, that you
humedad
have
en
no
el
plan
juego
B,
de
how
Uruguay con
does
la
the
continuidad y la
temperature and how
continuidad
does
que ha estado
humidity
siempre
affect
en la
Uruguayans,
cancha,
the
en la
players,
cancha y lo que
with the
falta de Copa América?
starters that have always been on the pitch?
Bueno, hay veces que hay
Well,
preguntas
at times
que para responderlas
there are
de
certain
manera
questions
eh, contundente, hay que
that if
recurrir
we were
a
to provide
datos
an
y
answer, we need to
también
rely
los
on
datos
data.
son muy definitorios
And when
eh,
data is
muy
so clear
comprobables y uno se refiere a ellos,
and they are
eh,
easily
parece una
verifiable,
posición un poco
and you refer to that,
creída, un poco vanidosa, ¿no? Ninguna,
you
y
may
no
appear
implica
as arrogant.
ni, ni
And
pasar por la posibilidad de ser interpretado
I wouldn't
como,
like to come
como
across
soberbio ni
as
como
arrogant
recurriendo a los números de manera
or
eh,
as
prioritaria.
someone
Pero si
that relies
la
solely
la
on
Conmebol,
numbers.
en una medida que para mí es muy saludable, ofrece
CONMEBOL,
datos
in
de
a
rendimiento
very healthy measure,
físico
in my view,
en las
provides physical
cinco o seis
performance
variables
details
más importantes que se evalúan.
for the 5 or 6 most
Y
important
uno puede ver
performance features analyzed.
cómo se
That allows
comportan
you
físicamente los rivales que se enfrentan,
to see
puede
how
ver el rendimiento
our
físico
next
individual de cada
opponents
jugador,
perform,
el
and
rendimiento
we can actually
físico
see
comparativo con el
each
jugador que
player's
enfrenta,
individual physical performance. We can
los valores de
compare
todos los
physical
equipos
performance against our
y en ese
opponents.
sentido
We have
haciendo ese
access to
ejercicio
every team's values.
eh,
And
la
by
pregunta
conducting
que
that
usted me hace,
exercise,
que la entiendo y que
the
me
question you've
parece
asked,
legítima,
and I totally
me
understand where you're coming
plantea
from, I think it's a legitimate question.
conclusiones que son muy fáciles de interpretar.
We find conclusions that are very easily to interpret in
Marcelo por
response
acá,
to that
Gonzalo
question.
Fasanero, no vale chumbear, Radio Oriental.
Gonzalo Fasanero, No Vale Chumbiar, Radio Oriental. First of all the luck for tomorrow's game. And I would like to ask you whether you are concerned about the controversies regarding the performance of the referees in the last games.
nunca
Referee
son saludables,
performance
sobre
controversies
todo
are never healthy,
porque los árbitros
particularly
tienen una tarea que es
because
muy, muy, muy
referees
difícil.
have a
Y
very,
pareciera
very, very
que el
tough job.
auxilio de la tecnología
And it would appear
nos
that
vuelve aún más
technology's
tercos
assistance has
para
turned us
valorar
even more stubborn
las
when it
conclusiones que,
comes
no,
to
que parecerían irreversibles, ¿no? Y eso
revisiting
a
some
mí, para
conclusions
mí
that
eso
would
es de
appear to be
desinterés en el
irreversible.
fútbol. El
And to
fútbol
me, that
en la
is
medida
greatly
que se
detrimental
pierde
to
vaya,
football
que se
because,
haría
in
más
as much
fácil
as
poder
anyone thinks
señalarlo y
that no one can
acusarlo,
fail, and that is if
crea
someone
una
fails,
serie de
they need to be pointed
condicionamientos
at and
que
accused,
operan
that is a
psicológicamente
strong
sobre los que
conditioner
tienen
that have
le
a
aseguro
very
que es mucho
serious
más difícil
psychological
arbitrar
impact.
que jugar.
Let me tell you,
Y le
it is
aseguro que
much
la lupa
higher
sobre cada
to
uno de los que
be
juegan
a referee than a
es
soccer player.
no
And the
mínima,
magnifier on the
es
soccer
mucho
players
menos exigente que la que opera
is
sobre los
far
árbitros,
less
por ejemplo.
demanding than
Y
the lens
también
we use to look at referees'
todos sabemos
performance.
que la justicia o la
And
injusticia
we all know that justice or
la medida
injustice
son injustas o justas, pero también
are
son
relative
acertadas o
considerations because a
desacertadas.
decision may be fair or unfair,
Uno
but
puede decir,
they
bueno,
may also be right
una
or
decisión
wrong.
desacertada es injusta. Sí,
So
bueno, el
any
juego
such
tiene esa
uncertain decision
particularidad.
we could be considered to be
En la
unfair. Well,
medida que el
that's
juego
all part of the
se
game.
vuelva absolutamente
And in
previsible,
as
y hacia
much
eso
as
vamos,
the game becomes fully predictable, and I
cada
believe that
vez
this is the direction that we're moving
irá
towards,
perdiendo el atractivo. Yo tengo la certeza de que el
it's going to
fútbol
become
está en un
less and less
proceso
attractive.
de,
I have no doubt
decreciente, es decir, el
that
fútbol cada
football
vez juega
is
más gente, pero cada vez es menos
on a
atractivo
downward curve.
porque
More and more
no
people
se
watch football,
privilegia
but it's less and
lo
less attractive
convirtió a este juego en el primer juego del
because
mundo.
we're neglecting what
Entonces,
has turned
ese
this game
proceso al
into the
final se corta.
world's
No es que si usted
preferred or favorite
deja que el
sport.
juego lo vea mucha gente,
And actually,
pero no protege que lo que se
right
mira
now,
es agradable,
the way we play it is not
eso
protecting the show.
favorece al negocio porque el negocio es que lo vean
This
mucha
favors
gente.
the
Pero
business because the
esa
business
curva
is
se
to have as
corta
many people watch
cuando
it
el
as possible.
fútbol
But
pasa el
I believe
tiempo
that this
y
is going to
cada
come to a
vez
halt
los
as time
futbolistas
goes
que merezcan
by,
ser mirados sean
and
menos
the soccer
y cada
players that
vez
deserve
que
to be
el
watched
juego que se produzca
become
sea
fewer and
menos
fewer,
agradable,
and every
ese
time the game
aumento
becomes less and less attractive.
artificial de los
So
espectadores
that
hace que el fútbol no
artificial
importe.
increase in the number of viewers
Porque el
is going to come
fútbol
to a stop
no es 5 minutos de acción, el fútbol es
because
muchísimo más que eso,
football is not about that
una
five
expresión cultural,
minutes
una forma de
reaction. Football
identificación.
is a cultural
Uruguay que
expression.
los
It's an
habitué,
identity treasure.
entre comillas,
Tell a
a Celeste
Uruguayan to watch the highlights of
cada
the
vez
Celeste, the Uruguayan
más,
national
pero
team.
no tiene nada que ver con la
There will be
esencia
more and
que
more, but that has
permitió que el
absolutely
amor
nothing
broto
to
de
do
una
with the
obsesión
essence that
por
made
encima
the
de la
country's population
identificación
fall in
más
love
significativo que
with
tiene el
the
pueblo, ¿no? Bueno,
strongest
entonces
symbol of identification of our
todo
people.
esto que no debería ser
So
motivo, lo que deberíamos hacer
all
todos
of
es
this
ignorar ese escenario que se propone
shouldn't be no reason. We should all be
mucha polémica,
ignoring that
la
scenario
discusión, la
proposed
acusación,
to us where
la
controversy,
determinación de
discussion,
la
finger
responsabilidad
pointing, and
se
the
vuelve una
imposition of
obsesión
responsibility become an
que
obsession
empeora el clima en el que se tiene que jugar al fútbol.
that only works to worsen the atmosphere that should be surrounding football. Alberto Quesman, Radio Universal, Channel 12. Bielsa, Uruguay has been one of the most celebrated teams by the international media, especially because of their collective game and their offense. But we are going to be taking on the strongest opponent so far. And one of the errors of Uruguay was, for instance, how the defense had to play when moving forward against Panama. Have you discussed
Bueno,
that
aquí
with
parte de una
Uruguayan soccer players?
apreciación que
Well,
si sigue
actually, you based your question
la
on an
sucesión de
appreciation
preguntas, verá
that
que
if you
es
have
exagerado,
followed
¿no?
all the different questions, you would
Nosotros
see
jugamos
that
con
it's actually
Panamá,
a bit of an overreaction.
con Bolivia y con Estados
We played
Unidos,
against Panama,
y
against Bolivia, and against the United States.
no, solo Estados Unidos está dentro
And
del grupo top de los
only United
participantes.
States may
Sin
be
embargo,
considered to be among this
las
tournament's
rotaciones
top
que
contenders.
están en el escenario es que
However,
Estados Unidos
one
jugó
of the
Uruguay.
possibilities is that Uruguay had its
Después
worst
usted hace
performance against the
referencia
United States. After that, you
acertadamente a lo
said
que al
correctly, I
comienzo
must
del
add,
juego, a través de la sucesión de
that at the
pases
beginning of the
elaborados que
game, through a
hicieron
succession
para
of elaborate
postergar el
passes,
equipo con la parte anterior,
trying
la
to
parte
connect
superior,
the defense and the
genera
offense, the
riesgos
defenders with the
que
offenders
hacen
create risks
que se debilite la
that
protección de
somehow
nuestro propio arco.
weaken the
Entonces
defense
eso
of our own box.
cuando uno consulta, sabe que hay que ofrecer el famoso
But
plan B que pareciera tan
so we
generalizado.
know that we need to
Precisamente tratar de
come up with this
evitar
plan B. The plan B to
esos
avoid the
mecanismos
problem that you just mentioned is to try to make
para
an
evitar
aerial
la presión del equipo
50-meter
rival
pass in order
y
to
que la
avoid our
disputa de los
opponent's
jugadores
pressure
creativos se
so
produzca en la
that
altura y no
our
en el piso,
creative strikers
con
would
pelota
dispute the
dividida y
ball
no con pelotas
coming with this
que
aerial
llegan,
pass with a divided ball rather
a
than
venir de
having
los
a
creativos de
secured
manera más
ball
prolija.
getting to the foot of our
Entonces, si
strikers
usted
in a
me pregunta si
neater
hay
way,
riesgo,
I
sí,
must
sí
add.
hay riesgo.
So if you're
Si usted
asking
me
me whether
pregunta
my
cómo
plan entails a risk,
se
it does.
resuelve, no
Now,
corriendo
if
el
you're
riesgo.
asking how
Si usted
you
me
can
dice
overcome this
cómo se
risk,
ataca
by
mejor
not taking any
tomando
risks.
riesgo sin
If you are
correrlo,
asking me
se
whether it's
ataca
better to
mejor
have an offense
haciendo
running
riesgo que
risk or
cuando
not
tenga
running
que agarrar el
risks,
balón de
in my
una
view,
manera más
it's better
prolija.
to run the risks
Después
that will
está
allow you to get to the
ganar o
strikers with a
perder,
neater pass.
y entonces si el
Of
sistema
course, you can win or you can lose.
tiene pocos errores y produce
But
calidad en el
if you
juego
make
ofensivo, será
fewer
valioso. Digo, será
mistakes and
valioso
you
si,
produce a
si
quality
tiene errores,
offensive
será
game,
criticado. Lo que pasa es que hay
you will be
veces que eso
applauded.
se
If you make
malinterpreta. Si
mistakes,
un
you're going to
jugador
be
le puede decir,
criticized.
tenés que salir
But
jugando,
there's
tenés que
something that
salir
is
goleando, que
impossible.
es
You cannot tell a
imposible. O sea,
player
si usted
you
dice
need
eso,
to
es
play
un
short
poco
passes
agresivo
forward, but you
para
cannot make
evitar los
mistakes.
errores. El
If I
jugador
were
eso
to
no,
say
no
that,
le va
which
a
would be the
entender,
only
le
way
va a
to avoid
interpretar.
mistakes, the soccer player will say, no problem, I totally get you. And he will only play aerial passes. Leandro Casada over here, can I ask my question in Portuguese? Bielsa, you are extremely respected and recognized in Brazilian soccer team. How long has it been between the Sao Paulo final in the Morumbi? That was a
No,
different
porque
kind of soccer, wasn't it? Yeah,
si
because
usted
check how
recuerda
interesting that
la
is. I
formación
don't know if you remember the
de San
lineup,
Pablo, que
the
con
San
un
Paulo's
entrenador
lineup,
monumental y una
with
formación
a
y una
huge
formación
coach.
de todos jugadores de selección brasileña
That lineup
jugando en
included
el
only
fútbol de
soccer
Francia
players of the
y
Brazilian national
podría
team that were
pasarle
playing in the
podría
National
pasar el fútbol
League.
sudamericano,
So
porque esa
see
sería
how South
ese
American
escenario.
football has
Entonces, usted hizo
suffered
la pregunta.
because you asked the question. No, you didn't ask
¿Quién
the
hizo la
question.
pregunta?
No, that's what I wanted to ask. Who asked the
Ah,
question?
bueno,
Well, it was
entonces
me. Yeah.
no me ponga, no me ponga en la
So
obligación de contestar con
please
con
don't
una
make me
evasión,
answer
sino diga usted la
with
verdad.
an evasive response.
Evidente
You tell the
en la
truth
sede
yourself.
del
the
varios
evident
integrantes, yo
truth
tengo mala memoria,
that
pero seguramente
arises from the scenario that
él
you are
jugaba
describing,
ahí,
because I
jugaba
don't have a very good
Pizarro,
memory.
Ronaldo,
And but there
Cafú,
were Antonio Carlos, Ronaldo,
todo
Cafú,
pintado, Eva
Pintado,
Nilsson,
Eva
Miller,
Nilsson,
eran todos jugadores
Miller.
europeos. Pero antes de irse a Europa
They were
ganaron
all
dos finales de Copa Libertadores.
European players, but before
Entonces,
they left for Europe,
imagínese,
they
imagínese
actually played two finals
qué ha
for the
pasado con el
Libertadores
fútbol.
Cup.
Cómo el fútbol, que es propiedad popular,
Check what happened with football.
esencialmente el
Football
es propiedad popular, porque los pobres
used to belong to the people.
tienen
Why did
muy
it
poca
used to belong to the
capacidad de
people?
acceso a
Because the
servicios
poor have very little
más, no
capacity
disponen de dinero
of
para comprar
having
felicidad.
joy because they have
Entonces,
absolutely no
el
money to
fútbol, como
purchase
es
happiness.
gratuito, es de origen
And
popular,
since football is free of charge and
entonces
it
ese
has very
fútbol
poor roots,
es
it
una de
was
las
the source
pocas
of
cosas
happiness.
que
That football
horizontalmente los más,
was one of the
pobres
few
mantienen, ya no la tienen más.
sources of
Porque a
joy
los
available to
17
the
años
poor, and now they no
Hendrik
longer have them because Endrick
Hendrix,
is saying goodbye at
Palmeira,
17.
bueno,
Palmeiras
todo eso.
winger.
Qué
I
lástima
mean,
que lo
every
tenga que
soccer
decir
player is
yo porque va a
leaving.
traer
I'm
nada
so
más
sad to say it
crítica.
myself
Y
because I'm only going to be
me
criticized for this.
imagino ajeno al negocio, si no, no haría la pregunta
And
o
I
a lo
believe
mejor
that you are
está fuera del
completely
negocio
outside the
y,
business because you wouldn't be asking that
fogonea,
question otherwise.
¿me entiende?
Or maybe you are
Porque
part of the
yo
business and you
creo
were
que
just trying to
si hay
spark
una
that
cosa que
answer.
se debería evitar
Because
es
if
que
there
los
were
medios
one
de
thing to be
comunicación
avoided, is for the
escuchen la voz
media
amplificada que
to hear
significamos
the
los que
amplified voice
circunstancialmente tenemos
of those
repercusión pública.
that
¿Entiende?
seldom
Yo
have
soy,
some
soy el técnico de
repercussion.
la selección uruguaya, si no,
I'm only hurt because I
sinceramente
am now the
pudiera
coach of
decirle
the
que
Uruguayan national
usted,
team, because otherwise who would be
como
interested in what I
representante
have to say?
de
But
un
you
gremio que se atribuye un poder
represent a
que lo
union
tiene y un
that
poder
has
con
huge
que
power and you know
manipulan
it.
hasta el
A
máximo,
power that will allow you
¿por qué
to
no
achieve the
hacemos
greatest
a
levels of
través de la investigación
manipulation. Why
desenmascarar
don't
las
you
mentiras?
do the necessary
¿Me
research in
entiende?
order to
Porque
unveil these
cada vez
lies?
que hay un episodio central,
Because every time
significativo del fútbol en el
there's a
mundo,
significant
el poder
event
difunde un montón de mentiras.
in global football,
Y después,
the powerful start
los
disseminating
encargados de la
lies.
difusión, en vez de
And then those in
investigar y
charge of
desenmascarar,
informing, rather than investigating and unveiling
al
those
estilo
lies,
Scaloni, ¿cómo se
actually
llama?
just seek to impose liability on public men. Who's the
Vinicius,
best winger in the world? Vinicius,
los usan,
Scaloni, and the
los
like.
usan, no para
They
desenmascarar la
use
verdad,
them
sino para polemizar a través
not
de
to
eso.
reveal the truth, but only
Entonces,
to create
¿qué
controversies.
hacemos? ¿Qué deberíamos hacer nosotros?
So, what
Contestar
can
con
we
evasión,
do?
¿me entiende? ¿Qué es
Just
lo que han conseguido? ¿Viste? Han
respond
conseguido
with elusive
contesta
answers.
con evasivas. Bueno,
Nobody
gracias.
wants to give their opinion anymore. They just evade questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.